Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited because today I have the pleasure and opportunity once again to be before you in another one of our Next Wave STEM summer webinars. Really excited because today we're talking about making drones real, where we're interacting with physical objects. Really exciting because for me at least, this entire summer, we spent some time in our webinars talking about the ways that we can teach remotely with our students, really focusing either or either on drones or on 3D printing. That we found is really engaging, really exciting for our students to interact with the technology, even if they can't physically be with the technology. However, something that's really cool is this ability now to kind of merge both of those worlds. So we're going to see a little bit of crossover today as we talk about the ways in which we can use drones and use drones in simulation, but even if we can have physical access to those drones, and ways that we can design to solve some problems using our 3D printer and 3D printing technology and software as well. So it's going to be really cool. And I'm going to confess right now that this is one of those webinars where I can nerd out really easily. I'm going to contain my excitement and make sure that we cover those basics because yeah, this is just really cool. Before we do get started, however, I do want to go over some ground rules. The first of which is that we are in webinar mode. I see a lot of return attendees today. Thanks so much for being with us. For those who are new to NextWaveSTEM in our webinar series, even though you might be camera ready, we won't be able to hear you or see you, but that does not mean that you can't communicate with us. The chat functionality is open, so is the Q&A function. So if you've got a question or a comment and it's something that you'd like to share with our community, if you post it in the chat, we will see it. Same thing with the Q&A, except the Q&A is anonymous. So we'll make sure that we either through the Q&A or through the chat get your answer live on air. In the event that I miss something that ends up in the chat, my colleague Sagundi Chigani, who is a part of our school partnerships team, is moderating the chat with us today. She'll have a chance to pop in and let us know a little bit more about NextWaveSTEM's programs towards the end of the webinar, but I'm really grateful to have her with us. Other piece of ground rules are that for our Illinois educators, for those who are local, NextWaveSTEM is based in Chicago, and in Illinois, this is a professional development hour. That means that in the follow-up email from today's webinar, you will be receiving a copy of today's slide deck, a recording of the webinar, and your certificate to turn into ISB. If you don't receive that, we've had a snafu in our last webinar with some of those emails going out through our automated system. If you don't receive that for some reason, just let me know and we'll make sure we get that to you. But with that being said, we will go ahead and we will push forward because we've got a lot, well, a decent amount to cover today. And hopefully you'll have some awesome ideas flying forward and thinking about some different things that you can do with your technology. A great place to begin is at the beginning, and I might sound like a broken record for some of us who have been here before. NextWaveSTEM, we really do believe that the future, that the solutions our world is so desperately going to need lies in the hands of our students right now. It is going to be absolutely critical that they have hands-on experiences with emerging technologies. Critical not only because those emerging technologies are going to be the basis for a lot of the work that they do in the future. That's going to be where careers grow and continue to show expansion. It's going to be critical because we have some huge challenges that we really do have to overcome. Before there was a global pandemic that has kept us out of the schools and has kept us or put us in a situation, as to say, where we have to do emergency remote and emergency distance learning. Before then, we had problems of global warming and food and climate change and all kinds of other problems that let's be frank, pose existential threats to people. We already see in the United States climate refugees, people who are having to relocate because the climate will no longer support where they can live. Um, our students are going to be critical. They're going to be critical in using emerging technologies like drones, robotics, 3D printing, artificial intelligence. Um, they're going to be harnessing these technologies and technologies that have not been invented yet to solve some of those really, really core problems. So NextWaveSTEM, we believe in supporting not only the students, but you as educators, because you're an integral part of that process. If our students don't have teachers, they won't learn. So our programs that are K through 12, um, designed for during school and out of school time, providing equipment, training, and curricula out the door, those things are there to encourage you as teachers, to get away from that fear that you might have of emerging technology, so you're not familiar yourself, so that you can teach drone technology to a kindergartner, or you can teach your fourth grader how to do computer-aided design and 3D printing. These things are not beyond our students, and they're certainly not beyond you. At the end of the day, we're empowering you as teachers to prepare our students for tomorrow. And we really think you can do it. So we've got some ambitious, really exciting goals for today's webinar, because we know that you can do it. One thing, well, the first thing that we're actually going to do is we're going to have the opportunity to explore how we can include real world objects into our drone learning. Something that we have done quite a bit is focus on simulation and flying our drone while not interacting with some real world objects. We're going to dig into ways that we can do that using our drone. The second thing we're going to do is this, we're going to bring in some crossover technology here to really expand our learning. Thinking about ways that we can use our resources in 3D printing to customize our students' drone experiences. This is where our imaginations really start to take off. And as we practice our mastery of the technology, we'll find ourselves being able to do all kinds of ingenious things. I'm so excited because we open up a can of worms. And that's a really great thing. A can of worms when we think about what our students are going to be able to do with their drones and 3D printers, ways that we can empower them if they don't have those technologies at home, and ways to get them those technologies at home. But then we want to tie things together. So we'll consider project-based learning opportunities. Project-based learning is a really, really effective way of getting our students to think critically and think about real world impact as they do their work. And especially right now where our students are engaged in distance learning, there are opportunities for them to really expand from what they've been doing traditionally in the classroom, which can sometimes frankly be much more rote, and explore ways where they're self-guided learning, engaging in technology that is actually exciting and engaging. So really, really excited to jump right in. I will offer this caveat as well. I can speak quickly when I get excited. I'm still working on reeling myself in. I'm going to be paying attention to how quickly I go today. But if I am going too fast, don't hesitate to drop something in a comment to let me know I need to slow it on down as well. So let's begin by exploring the drone. The amazing thing about this platform that we use, whether it's simulation or physical flying, is that the drone is consistent. We simulate with the same drone, we fly the same drone. When we're flying remotely, when we're flying autonomously, when we're coding, that experience is consistent. So our students aren't learning a new platform, and they're not learning something in the abstract. They're going to learn something that they can physically use. And since we want our drones to interact with physical objects, and we want to think about and consider how our students can get hands-on and be thinking hands-on when they simulate, it makes sense for us to understand a little bit more about our drone. So this application we may be already familiar with. If you're explored drone flying, especially autonomous drone flying, where we're coding the drones so that they will be able to fly by themselves. If you're not so familiar, TelloEDU is the application and the physical drone that we fly in our programs. And it really gives us a lot of flexibility when it comes to controlling and having the drone do what we want it to do. It's block-based programming, which means that our students don't have to learn um, where the semicolon goes and where the bracket should be, and if the code is broken because we're missing something, um, or something is misspelled, for example. All those considerations go out the window because it's drag and drop. So we can really focus on the logic of the code and having the drone do what we want it to do. It gives us the benefit of being able to simulate flights, which is a really, really, really powerful thing that we can have. Something that we're going to dig into a little bit more is this idea of live sensor output. So as our drone is flying, we can get information about what's going on with our drone, but also what our drone is sensing. That's really powerful. And the TelloEDU app is very useful because it's cross-platform. So if you've got a Chromebook, if you've got Android or iOS devices, which many of our students might have access to, they can download this app for free and simulate flight for a drone or control a physical drone. But what we don't talk about very, very often is the actual physical drone that we use to fly, which is the TelloEDU drone. Um, this drone is easily, by far, the best drone at its size for being able to fly. And I would literally have this drone take the Pepsi challenge with any other drone in the size and price category. The Tello drone is a partnership between DJI and Intel, manufactured by a Chinese firm called Rise Technologies. Some of you might be familiar with DJI. They control about 80% of the drone market, and many hobbyists as well as professionals are using their products in order to fly and do professional work, really in a cinematic space. What does all that mean, Desmond? That means that this drone flies really well. It's a solid flyer and something that we can trust and rely on in a classroom to do really precise flying. Our drone weighs about 80 grams. For those of us who need that metric conversion, that's about 2.8 ounces. And we love that in NextWaveSTEM. The reason we love that is because it's well underneath the FAA regulations for registering the drone. The FAA says that if your drone weighs more than about 10 ounces, I can't remember the exact figure off the top of my head, but if your drone is heavy enough, that you do have to register with it with the FAA. And the reasons for that actually are pretty obvious. If our drone flies into a sensitive area or is involved in some kind of accident, or it just gets lost because we had some kind of incident with the weather, for example, it's useful for the authorities to know whose drone belongs to who. So that registration takes place. With a drone that's only less than 3 ounces light, the risk for injury to people, to property, is greatly diminished. That means that our drones are able to fly indoors and outdoors without incident. Of course, if we're someplace like Chicago where it can get kind of windy, we don't want to fly our drones in winds that are higher than 15 miles per hour. But generally speaking, our drones can be used in all kinds of different situations. It's not a huge drone. It's 98 by 92 by 41 millimeters, just about 4 inches by 4 inches. So not the biggest drone in the world at all. Think about maybe a small dinner plate or a baseball glove. Our propellers are 3 inches long. They're made out of flexible plastic. That's what I would say is the only consumable on our drone. If our drone, scratch that, when our drone crashes. And that's something that happens. Drones crash. You're not a real drone pilot until you crash your drone. When your drones crash, you do not break this drone. You might chip a propeller and your drone comes with extra propellers. If you burn through your extra propellers, those replacements are about $3 to replace a whole set of propellers on a drone. And we see replacements maybe once every few months. So really not a whole lot of consumable material when we think about flying our drone. Our drone has some really interesting built-in functions that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. Our rangefinder is actually an infrared rangefinder. So it allows our drone to know a little bit more about the distance from the ground. We have a barometer, so our drone can measure its height more generally in the air column so that we can stay within FAA regulations, making sure that we don't fly above 400 feet in the air. We have an LED on the drone. There is a camera system, and that camera system is shooting 720p. That's SD, 5 megapixels. So think about your phone from maybe 5 or 6 years ago at this point. There is a micro USB charging station. That's useful, of course, to charge your drone up, but the drone is connected by its hot swappable batteries. NextWaveSTEM in our drone kits and our equipment kits, we make sure that you have everything that you need to fly your drones. And our drone connects to devices via Wi-Fi. Um, and it's the Wi-Fi that's generated by your device. Some drones are Bluetooth connected drones. We like this Wi-Fi drone because that gives us the ability to take those pictures in camera and see what's going on with our drone. But we also like the Wi-Fi connection because it's something that can be extended as well. That's something we talk a little bit more about in our curricula. Got a couple other questions here. Oh, Brandon, yeah, Brandon jumped in, helped us there. The FAA regulations on how heavy the drone has to be is 250 grams per regulation. So we're well underneath the 250 gram limit that the FAA requires. Francesca asked about cost. We sell our drones at NextWaveSTEM in equipment bundles. I'm going to have Segundi follow up with you, Francesca, so she can give you exact pricing because we're actually running a promotion right now for all of our webinar attendees. Really great questions so far. So the big question, and I actually want to pause for a little bit because now that we know some physical information about our drone, question that I'm going to put to our participants on the line right now, what can you imagine our drone interacting with? Some of you might have flown drones before, and so you have an idea of what your drones can do. Some of you may have never flown drones before, so you may be thinking to yourself what you've seen in the media or just what you read or in your own personal research. But let me know. I'm actually gonna be quiet for a little bit. Let me know, what can you imagine a drone this size? A drone 4 inches by 4 inches, so maybe this big in my hands. For scale for my face. You don't know how big my face is, but maybe a drone this size. What can we imagine that drone being able to interact with? Oh, that's really cool. We got some good ones already. Virtual tours of the school, assemblies and sporting events. Yes, might cause a disruption at that assembly, but really, really, really fun. With a chorus of obstacles, yeah, definitely. Oh, Jen, yeah, you said your drone caused a disruption. Yeah, I can imagine that until it gets like normalized, then our kids are gonna be like, oh my God, it's a drone, so cool. What other kind of things might our drone, especially one that's this size, really on the smaller size, what could it interact with? I'll give us maybe another 30 seconds. We've got some good answers so far. Well, for those who are wondering and thinking more, about what our drone can interact with, this idea of flying around our school ground using the camera to shoot video, assemblies and sporting events, doing a virtual tour, obstacle courses, and even blowing paper onto the floor. That's really awesome stuff that our drone can do. And it's exciting and it's fun. But we can even think outside the box more and more with respect to what our drone can do. And the way that I kind of classify that is really dividing our drone into two sets of functions. The first I like to call digital interactions. And interactions really focuses on our sensors. Sensors sounds very, very technical, but really it's based on the word structure, because my words are failing me, it is based on this ability to sense, to understand something that's happening in the world around it. So if you would think of yourself, the human body as a machine, you've got sensors. Your eyes tell you information about light, reflecting off other objects most of the time. Your ears give you information about changes in air pressure, those micro changes that make up sound. You've got the ability to sense differences in temperature. You've got the ability to distinguish different chemical compounds. And when you taste and smell things, you've got the ability, these pieces of hardware on our bodies, to let you know about what's happening around you. And so do machines, so does our drone. The camera of our drone is very similar to an eye in that same respect, that it's capturing light. We have a digital thermometer on our drone that gives us the ability to have more information about um, actually how hot or cold it is in the ambient environment of our drone. Um, You'll see on this picture here, there are two sensors on the bottom of our drone. The one to the left is the thermometer. The one to the right is a laser rangefinder, downward firing. So our drone can measure in fine detail how close it is from the ground, how close it is from an object that's directly underneath the drone. That gives us some safety capabilities so that our drone can get out the way of an object that's approaching from underneath it. So we have this idea of digital interactions. The drone is taking in this information and using the mechanics of the sensors is translating that directly into X's and O's, directly into code, things that can be displayed to our students via the TelloEDU application, but also things that we can program for and cause some if-then statements around, cause the drone to interact around. That's kind of those digital interactions. And all that is native to the drone. Really great, really easy to work with. But what I'm more interested in is the second category when I think about drone interactions, and those are physical interactions. And this is kind of like the big buildup for me because that's when we start to talk a little bit more about expanding across technologies with 3D printing. The drone, this particular drone, is 3 ounces. It does not come with any physical built-in way to carry a payload. 3 ounces is not a lot of weight. Our battery is not very big. It's only 1100 milliamp hours. For reference, that's maybe a third of the size of your iPhone or a comparable smartphone. So it's not a very big battery. The flight time is about 13 minutes. And what we do at that flight time is really allow the students to code and execute the code as they're coding through their challenges. Um, and that doesn't become a deterrent in our courses because with NextWaveSTEM's drone, the Tello drone, we make sure that we include extra batteries and a quick charger so that you can have continuous flight time. But the interesting thing about a drone being this small and this light and with limited flight time is that it's not designed to have attachments to carry something like a large camera or to do delivery. But that does not stop us from augmenting and working with our drone in such a way that we can make those capabilities available to our students via the power of 3D printing. So what I'm going to do now is actually show what that looks like. So how can we open up our students in their ability to augment their drones to do more? I'm actually going to switch my screen over to my browser to show off our good friend Tinkercad. And Tinkercad is our 3D printing cloud-based platform. Many of you may also be familiar with Tinkercad when it comes to introducing our students to CAD and introducing our students to 3D printing. Really love Tinkercad because it's going to give us a chance to change some things up. Um, as our students progress and learn more and more about 3D printing, part of what they learn is that they're not working in a complete vacuum when they think about what they have access to technologically. There are hobbyists and professionals and creators of all different stripes and working with all different technologies, solving problems. Those problems also include, how can I get my drone to give me a little bit more functionality? So what I've done, kind of that cooking show example that I'm pretty fond of making, is actually expanded our thinking about what we can do. I've tabbed over to this other tab. Thingiverse is an online, free to access library of 3D printed designs. And in Thingiverse, if I just search Tello, I find a few things here that have been designed, other designers have made available and free for our students to use to really augment what our Tello can do. Um, so for example, if I click on the DJI Tello landing gear, we get an example of 3D printed files that do exactly that. Our Tello has landing pylons, but maybe we want to extend the height that the Tello lands from the ground. We might be concerned about our propellers striking something. Well, we can download and 3D print our landing gear file and expand the ability of our drone to be able to land different places. It literally will just snap on to the bottom of our drone. Let's back it up because there's another example I want to take a look at here. I've gotten really interesting questions about, can we 3D print propellers? Absolutely. We can 3D print propeller replacements or propeller guard replacements. We can do some historical 3D printing. We can kind of create this 3D printed lunar lander bottom for the drone. I'm not going to 3D print it, but it does look super duper cool. We can experiment with aeronautics a little bit and change up the fan design, the actual propeller design. The propellers that come native with the Tello are two-bladed, but this propeller design here is four-bladed. I have no idea what that will do to the way the drone flies, but I would be willing to find out. But the most interesting by far design that I've seen on Thingiverse with respect to our Tello drone has been what's called the Tello egg flopper. Someone got the bright idea of trying to carry a whole egg on top of their Tello drone. And these files are free for us to download. So being the dutiful nerd that I am, I downloaded the files and I have now got that STL file that I can import, that I can add to Tinkercad. So when I hit this import button, it's going to ask me to choose a file. You may not see the file chooser that popped up, but I'm going to pick on the file that's called the Tello egg flopper. And there it is. It's telling me it's the TelloEggFlopper.stl. That STL file format is the standard file format for 3D printing. And it even tells me what the dimensions of this piece is. 66.39 millimeters by 50 millimeters with a height of 50 millimeters. So I can even get a sense of how big this thing is going to be, and I could play around with the scale and make an enlarged or a smaller version if I wanted, depending on what kind of file I'm importing. But because I want this thing to scale, the creator has worked really hard to make sure that it fits the Tello. I'm just going to keep it at the standard 100, this 1-to-1 scale for our egg flopper. So when I hit import, after a little bit of time uploading, there it is. I have my Tello egg flopper that's been imported. This in and of itself gives us a huge opportunity to make drones much, much more interesting for our students. I'm going to rotate our egg flopper around. So we can kind of see here, and I'll adjust where it sits, that we have 2 clips on the bottom that snap to the side of the drone, and our egg flopper sits on the top of the drone. Using our 3D printer, we have a new plastic piece that literally snaps onto the drone, and we can do all kinds of interesting things now with the drone. The actual 3D modeling CAD software that we have in Thingiverse expands our abilities to think about what our students can do, even with this design. So what I can do, I have my Tinkercad menus. I'm actually going to zoom out so we can get just a better view of what's going on with our egg flopper. Our egg flopper, maybe we just wanted to carry eggs. The creator of our egg flopper did try this thing out on an actual egg, and they found that an egg was a little bit too heavy to fly on the back of the Tello drone. But what they did learn was that a not a cartoon, a plastic Easter egg actually could fit in that drone just fine. So maybe our students might be planning how they can deliver a package in those plastic Easter eggs. That might be something that they want to plan for. But if they don't have plastic Easter eggs around the house, just really convenient for them to use, I'm gonna select this egg and just get rid of that guy. The really useful thing about Tinkercad is it allows us to simulate and plan for different scenarios that students might have access to. So instead of highlighting on carriers or characters, I select that Make at Home menu. And the Make at Home menu gives me some things that I know my students might have a little bit more access to, like pennies. So I've got a little bit better scale for how big our Tello device is, our extension is. I can move this penny and I can kind of visualize now where this penny might go inside the device. And I can even, after adjusting this penny a little more, I can just copy paste that penny and change the orientation and figure out how many of these pennies I might be able to fit inside of this egg carrier. But you know, an egg carrier is an egg carrier, not necessarily a penny carrier. And there are other things that I might actually want to carry. Well, how can I access those things? Well, what I want to do first is think about what we may already know about 3D printing and 3D design. And this is a really, really clever design in terms of a part, because what it is actually a clip that's connected to a holder. The work of connecting our drone to this part happens at the bottom. Everything else at the top is kind of gravy, right? So that means that I can modify everything that's above the clip. And now I just have the ability to connect stuff to my drone. What I'll do is take a basic shape in this case, a box. I'm gonna grab this box, and this box is actually a hollow box. It's a negative space. One thing we talk about all the time is making sure that our students are a little bit ingenious, thinking of how they want to use Tinkercad. And in that way, they can make some really, really interesting designs. A basic skill is taking a three-dimensional shape like a box. I'm gonna rotate around a little more so I can see better. I'm gonna grab this box here, pull it out this way some more. Grab this box, make it larger there. If I'm making sure that everything is covered as I rotate around in this negative space, and then I'm making sure also that I get this cut as low as I want. I have to adjust some more. I've got this really strange looking figure where I've got positive space and negative space. But basically this serves as an eraser. So I can select one part, which is the actual clip. I can select the other part, which is the negative space. I'll select the negative space first. I'll select the clip second. We'll just drag and drop to select them both. And when I merge and group the shape, what I'm going to have is a cut. Now I have the ability to do all kinds of different things and modify this clip, because that's all it is an actual clip. I can put anything I want now in terms of three-dimensional design on top of this clip and 3D print it. So let's say instead of transporting eggs, I'm going to go back to my make at home. I might like to transport a bunch of pencils and popsicle sticks. I might need some kind of way to actually carry these items. Well, an easy way to think about that is I'll grab another item. I'll grab my tissue roll. And I can adjust my tissue roll in such a way where when I connect my tissue roll and my clip and I group them, I now have this object, and I'm going to change the color of this object because right now it's multicolor. I just want to do a single color. I have this object that I can now potentially carry items inside of. So working quickly, I can grab a pencil, float it up, and imagine having my pencil sit in the inside of this object. The same thing with the popsicle stick. So when we talk about students downloading and modifying 3D prints so they can serve other problems, things like the clip for the top of the Tello really becomes the really great demonstration of how powerful that can be for our students. It takes a little bit of doing and a little bit of combinations of the skills that you learn with NextWaveSTEM and that your students will learn, but you can do some really, really powerful stuff. Now, really the advanced level thing that you can think about when doing digital design work with 3D printing is actually designing your own drone in 3D space. I'm going to delete everything that I have. A drone is really a collection of parts. And when we think about that connection of parts, if you know what a drone is, if you know that a drone at its core, let me go to components, is a motor. I'm gonna rotate this motor up this way. And this is a very, very common hobby motor. I can take this motor, I can duplicate it a couple of times. We'll duplicate some more. Now I've got 4 motors. And maybe I also include, make sure I can find out where they are. There are also there are propellers in here someplace. I'm sure they're in the shape generators. That's where they are. So almost immediately, you can kind of see where I'm going here. That our students aren't just limited to the physical object that you might be able to provide with them. They can do a little bit more advanced design work and start to put together their own quadcopter, for example, building some parts. Now, how well it flies, that takes a little bit more advanced working. Making different parameters to our 3D printed components or what our actual final components are going to be takes a little bit more work than we have time to cover in the webinar. But that's a really great example of things that our students can do to combine the digital space that they're working with to some really physical useful things that will allow them to explore some more. So I'm going to actually flip back now to our PowerPoint slideshow because I absolutely took too much time and nerded out over this. So now the big question becomes, okay, I know more about my physical capabilities of the drone. I know that I can integrate and go across what we've learned in 3D printing and what we can pull out of the 3D printing curricula and through training and through the equipment, and the curricula, the training, the equipment for the drone. We can start to expand some more. Is there an opportunity for project-based learning here? The answer is absolutely yes. Lots of us are familiar with project-based learning. Some of us dread project-based learning. We think that it takes a little bit too much time. And it is different than the way that we traditionally think about projects and problems. Generally, when we do project-based learning, we see this idea of it being the dessert that's on the end of the meal. We start with the launch of the unit. We have a lesson that's followed up by activity, lesson, activity, lesson, activity, repeat ad nauseum. We get to our assessment, where we take our quiz, our test, or even our standardized assessment. And then once we've had all that fun, okay, now we can do the project. The project becomes this capstone thing for us to do. Project-based learning is different. It turns that idea on its head, where the project isn't this capstone or this assessment thing. It becomes the learning methodology, where we have the beginning of our project, then student-led work that can look like many different things that doesn't have to be decided by you, but is included with you as you're planning and working with the students. It's lectures, it's workshops, it can be research and lab time. It doesn't have to be one thing for all of our students. It doesn't have to be students working individually or in teams. It can be a hybrid of those things. There's flexibility and differentiation really baked in for our students. We move to that benchmark where the student is able to show what they have learned through the activity that they're driving. And then the reflection, where you're giving feedback as an instructor about where they're trying to go, what problem they're trying to solve, how their project is progressing. And those different student-led activities lead to different things. Some of them baked right into what we do in NextWaveSTEM when you think about simulation and modeling, but including our real community members, because we're solving these problems for real people. So it may be interviews and quizzes. It may be creating the actual drone. It may be pulling in feedback and giving feedback to our teams. It may be building, writing, drafting. These different modalities way that our students show what they know and solve problems in real ways. And the amazing thing is that it all starts with the driving question. Depending on our students' developmental level, their age level, your specific situations, your driving question, the thing that anchors your project, the problem that you're trying to solve, may look different from classroom to classroom because of your own personal context. I like to think about it as pulling that problem, pulling that project either from the headlines or the living room. What's happening nationally, what's happening internationally, what's happening on the end of the street, and what can we do with our technology to help solve it? And there are all kinds of questions that we have to consider with respect to that. What is the problem that currently exists? What's the real thing people are dealing with? Where making the drones real, the physical drone real for our students, is that it expands this idea and thinking of the tools that are available to help us solve the problem. It's not just the drone as it is. It's the drone that we also have the ability to modify and to change and to add capabilities to. And then, of course, we're always thinking about the people or person in some situations that we're solving the problem for. Is this actually working for them? So there are a couple of examples that we use for solving problems. How might the drone observe traffic in our neighborhood? Our drone, as it stands right now, has a camera that's forward-facing. 3D printing and some crafting may allow us to construct a device that changes the angle at which our drone is able to take video. Staying nationally, how might we establish safe for drone operation around airports? We might be adding devices that make our drones more visible. Internationally, how might we establish international rules for drone usage? It becomes an amazing research opportunity for our students and ways to explore well beyond what they understand about technology in their own context. Project-based learning becomes really, really super powerful in that way. And as we mentioned, that student-led work changes. In the project-based learning modality, it's not just flying, it's not just coding, it's actually also 3D design work, 3D printing. We have so many different steps now that become usable for our students, that student-led and student-driven. Of course, are a place for you to benchmark and get reflection. It becomes a complete integrative STEM practice for your students, which is why I am so excited when you all give it a try. So I know I've answered lots of questions here, and that's kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit. And for the interest of time, I'm actually going to pull back a little bit, but say that there are ways, these ways in thinking about modifying our drones, ways in carrying different objects. It may be the plastic bag, it may be the newspaper, it may be walking the dog and creating an attachment for our drone that allows the drone to actually do that. We can actually, because of our expanded ability in 3D printing, make that real and take this thing from what if and maybe I can to saying, okay, if we can imagine that, let's actually give it a try. The drone technology and the 3D printing technology really allows us to live in the future. So I've hit you with a fire hose of information about what you can do. Now I want to actually turn it over to Segundi to talk a little bit more concretely about what NextWaveSTEM can do. We've empowered you, given you some resources even in this webinar. What are the other things that NextWaveSTEM can do to help? At this time, I'm turning it over to Segundi. Segundi, how can—
Awesome. Thanks, Des. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we got you.
Great. Okay, my internet has been in and out today, you know, indicative of a regular Tuesday afternoon. So if I cut out, apologies in advance. So yeah, here at NextWaveSTEM, we've been doing a bunch of things to make sure we are keeping our educators kind of at that front line fresh with information so they can use it in their classes. As you can see on this slide here, Des has led a bunch of different trainings such as this. So hope that many of you can join the next one as well. And this will continue throughout the summer. So you can look on our website, go ahead and register and learn how to bring that to your classes. The other couple things that we're doing is that we're working directly with students, with schools, to bring them different kinds of experiences remotely. So we have our online experience, which is where one of our instructors will work with a group of students on delivering either a drone, 3D printing, or robotics class. And so for that, they need some sort of device and internet connection, and they can get a lot of this hands-on stuff. And it's some of the stuff that Des showed you, which is doing stuff in Tinkercad, any of that sort of experience. The other experience we have is a hands-on experience where it is the online experience combined with these STEM kits. So they'll get to build their robot, they'll get to fly their drone, they'll get to 3D print what they've designed. So we have a bunch of different things going on. In our classes that we've had so far, we've received some really great feedback from students that they're really enjoying it. And we want to make sure that any time they spend in front of the screen is useful, meaningful, effective, engaging. And so we try to do all these things in our classes. So if you have any questions about this or interested, reach out to me. We do have some preferential pricing for anyone that's been on our webinars. So please ask me about that as well. Thank you, Des.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sugandhi, for sharing that with our participants today. Just like Sugandhi said, we are trying to put everything together for you so that your students, no matter whether they are remote or in your classrooms in the next couple of months, can really get hands-on with STEM in some really robust ways. That is curriculum training and the equipment all out of the door. So there's so much to actually synthesize there. We made it rich, like chocolatey cake and flavorful food. We gave you a kind of well-seasoned webinar, and that might mean that there are some questions that you might have. So the floor is open with a couple of minutes that we left. Are there any questions that you have about anything? 3D printing, flying the drone, putting things together, registering for NextWaveSTEM courses and equipment and material. What are your questions? And this is the other part where I will be silent. And there is no such thing as a bad question. Oh, really good question from Tim there. What kind of motors does the Tello have? The Tello is using AC current motors. I can't tell you exactly what those amp outputs are. I would have to look that up for you. What I do know is that you're getting an RPM of about 10,000 revolutions per minute. I would say that they are brushless, but I'll have to also check on that as well. Yeah, Tim, I will definitely check on that and get back to you because I don't know the specifics of the motors off the top of my head. One thing I will say about the motors is that the motors and the propellers that are connected to those motors, they're the business end of the drone. That is the only place where you will have any kind of safety concerns as well. But because of how small these drones are, because relatively speaking, those motors are spinning much slower than some larger drones, and the propellers are much softer than other drones. We've seen injuries be, for all intents and purposes, non-existent. The worst we've seen is nicks and cuts, things that need Band-Aids at the worst. With a question, good question from Alan, who says his challenge has been preparing drones from mini crashes. I don't want to discourage students, but how do you minimize damage? Really great question. Um, so it's kind of the physics problem, right? The issue being speed and mass running into hard objects. The first thing I would say, especially with a drone that is this light, is that we found it to be extremely robust. If we are trying to minimize damage, definitely fly outdoors where you're really going to be colliding with grass more than you would hard floor or with a wall. First and foremost, we want to give ourselves as many soft surfaces as possible. The second thing is that you want to get a drone that's as much as possible a little less complex. A bigger drone, say like a DJI Mavic 2 with a large boom arm because of a large propeller, that's a part that can fail. Something that's much smaller, where there's less torque involved, um, is going to incur a lot less damage. In the hundreds of drones that we've flown in NextWaveSTEM, the most damage we have seen is motors that have burned out after maybe over a year of use. We've seen a failure rate of less than 2% at this point on our drones that are used in the classroom. So as a direct answer to your question, um, give yourself soft spaces, try to limit the altitude that the drones can fly, give yourself open spaces. The less opportunity for those crashes into vertical objects, the much longer the flight life of your drone. Legitimate question, really good question. Are there any other questions? Those are really good ones so far. And like I said before, I know we kind of hit you with a lot of information. So certainly encouraging all of our participants that if they have any more questions, you can certainly reach out to me or Segundi after the webinar. Segundi is actually going to drop her email address in the chat. But for those of us who would like to reach out to me to get a little bit more information specific on either our drone or our equipment in 3D printing, Tinkercad and software, TelloEDU and the software. I am reached at desmond@nextwavestem.com. NextWaveSTEM is also on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn. We are on Instagram. Reach out to us and connect with us. We'd love to get to know you and really chop it up and think about what your needs are going to be in the drone space, what your needs are going to be in the STEM space. What we showed today was just a little touch of what we do at NextWaveSTEM, and we would love to share more and more about what we do with you from the K all the way up to the senior in high school. We would love to make a STEM impact. So with that being said, I'm thankful for each and every one of you who has been on the line today. I hope that we've got some really interesting ideas flowing. We've got some great ways that you're thinking of and already ideating on how you can get more hands-on with drone equipment and 3D printing with your students. If you are looking for more ideas, in the email that I'm sending out today, you'll get the recording for today's webinar, but it is a YouTube link and there's going to be recommendations for our other NextWaveSTEM webinars. Check them out and dig into them. You may see something that's really good, and when you find it, you let us know and we'll guide you through some more. But until our next webinar, which is on Thursday's webinar, dealing with technology for good, 3D printing for personal protective equipment, this broader idea of project-based learning and focusing on a tangible thing in 3D printing. Until I see you in that one, you all have a great day and be safe out there. Appreciate you so much, and we will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye now.